Hello and welcome to the Embedded channel. It's fantastic to see such a great turnout today. Thank you, everyone. My name is Bob Sharman, and I'm here with Antoine Isserly.
Hi, everyone. Antoine Isserly, located in New York, and looking forward to have a conversation about embedding.
We look after MicroStrategy's embedded and OEM business, which has grown a great deal over the past couple of years. And a huge thank you to those in attendance who have played such a big role in our success. A quick look at the agenda. We'll start with a brief historical perspective regarding some of the predominant approaches to analytics integration, or lack of integration in some cases, over the past decade or so. We'll then touch on some of the top reasons our customers choose to embed and extend their applications, and give some examples of what we consider to be best practices integration. We'll then launch into a bit more of the how, particularly regarding the use of the embedding API to support things like analytics-driven workflows, which is really the key theme of the next hour. We'll then summarize some of the more popular use cases for our REST APIs. For us, REST itself it's a very broad topic, so we'll just summarize key value points and then direct you to other REST-based sessions here at World where you'll be able to do more of a deep dive. And then lastly, we hope to have enough time for Q&A, at least 20 minutes or so. The integration journey, a brief history. We thought it would be contextually useful to start with a brief summary of how analytics integration has generally evolved and matured over the past 10 or 15 years. Portal integration, then iframes. We now have full embedding, and of course, hyperintelligence. And we imagine the predominant approach soon will be where applications combine the last two. Portal integration. There was a time not long ago, and still in use today, where a user navigates to a portal site, searches through folder icons, and hopefully finds some useful insights connected in some manner to the user's job function. And this works okay, and having access to some analytics is better than none. However, this approach provides typically minimal association between the folder, or often even the report inside the folder, and the user's application. So there's no real context. By the way, if you're going to have to pop out of your daily operational apps to get content, it might as well be a pretty example like this library. Iframe integration. The next innovation was the iframe, where users no longer need to navigate away from their familiar application screens, which saves time and clicks. However, the analytics in the frames are still, for the most part, disassociated from the application. And iframes, of course, are still very much in use today. The embedding API. This is where things really become interesting, because the embedding API enables the infusion of analytics directly within your application, where they bidirectionally interact in context. And the user is delivered intuitive analytics within their comfortable, familiar surroundings. Hyperintelligence and the Hyper SDK. It's of course true that hyperintelligence is yet a further evolution. Zero-click analytics, answers that find you. That said, there are things that the embedding API does that Hyper was not designed to do, and of course, vice versa. And this compare will become clearer after the channel session on Hyper SDK, which Antoine is hosting right after this one, right, Antoine? I think it's right after. One key distinction is that while Hyper allows you to deploy analytics anywhere once you've built the cards, with Hyper, you don't always know where or when the data is going to be needed. With the embedding API, you usually do know. Anyway, there are fantastic use cases for both using the embedding API as well as Hyper in the same application. And we imagine that most world-class applications will combine both. And we'll touch on more of these synergies a bit later. Okay, the top reasons to customize, embed, and extend. There are so many ways to do this that are high value, but we'll touch on 4 here. Number 1, ensure the most intuitive look and feel while applying brand awareness. You, of course, want to present a consistent and intuitive visual experience across all your application elements. And we think this use case on the screen is a good example. It's an OEM use case And it also shows an effective treatment of brand awareness, in this case, classic white labeling. Antoine will go into more depth on this shortly. Number 2, infuse your applications with contextual insights with no user disruption. We mentioned this earlier. The embedding API enables infusion of analytics directly within your application and in context, and all within the user's comfortable, familiar surroundings. Here we're toggling between a pure web app and the same app with embedded analytics. So there are many key benefits here. It can greatly decrease the user's pain during application upgrades, which can require a lot of training. We've all experienced the frustration of adjusting to, say, Microsoft's latest operating system or upgrades to PowerPoint or Word. Wait, what happened to the animation drop down, or the shortcut I used to use doesn't work anymore? It can take months to regain fluency. So the embedding API can be very, very powerful here. Number 3, actionable insights and workflows. Let's take the prior example a step further. And remember, we're starting with a web app with no analytics. What if context-aware analytics could be infused directly within your application and workflows? Now, imagine deploying event handlers that contextually direct the workflow based on things like user interaction. By clicking on the red bar, the kids and family category, which indicates a category revenue issue, that will trigger a second visualization showing category items and their respective revenue and stock quantity. And by selecting, in this case, Sesame Street, the user is directed to the web application's promotions module, where an action could be taken. We think this is very powerful, and you'll see how we recommend achieving this in a few minutes. Number 4, manage and extend your applications. Every element of the platform is accessible through the REST API. You can automate and enable really any administrative workflow. For example, pushing down user management tasks to your divisions or to your tenants if you're an OEM, designing your own specific UI to manage subscriptions, and of course, using REST makes it much easier than ever to integrate with, say, Alexa or other bots or natural language engines, data science tools, even other visualization tools such as Excel. And there's an embedded channel session coming up later today on that. The example you're seeing right here is how simple it is to extend the platform by enabling Tableau users. And with that, I'll hand the keys over to Antoine, who will explain more about how all this works.
All right. Thanks, Bob. So what we're going to look at right now is how the embedding API and embedding SDK is implemented. And in order to do so, we're going to go through 4 different steps. Some of them are actually happening even before we do the actual embedding, but really needs to happen to enhance the experience of your end users. So every step along the way, we're going to focus on the value and tell you why they're important to implement. The first one is going to actually focusing on your design, on your experience. We want our users to have as seamless of a transition as possible when it comes to using analytical content within your existing application. They are used to a certain UX, a certain design, and you have corporate guidelines, corporate branding. MicroStrategy have capabilities that really gives any designer everything they need to unleash their creativity. They can build dossier analytics that looks exactly like the original content, the original software, that looks exactly like what the user is familiar with. And so the value you get out of it is really to ease the change management. If it's done correctly, there will be absolutely no distinction between the original application and the embedded analytics. And this is where we want to be. The second part is actually an optional one. MicroStrategy out of the box got a lot of different visualizations available. But if you happen to have a specific need that is not covered, you should be aware that there is an incredible JavaScript visualization community available on the internet. Like one of the most known is perhaps the D3 community, but you have a lot of those available, some open source, some not. But long story short, MicroStrategy provides something that we call the Visualization SDK that will allow you to take visualization in JavaScript and actually enable it to work really plug and play into the MicroStrategy ecosystem. So it's really not a heavy task to implement. All you will need is widely available JavaScript skills, and what is going to be the task to perform is to take this third-party visualization and use the Visualization SDK to map, rewire the MicroStrategy capability, like, how your visualization is supposed to behave when you drag and drop things through MicroStrategy. How should your visualization filter other visualization when someone is clicking on things on it? So this kind of behaviors needs to be rewired. That's really not heavy lifting, and then it's ready plug and play by any of your analytics designers. So the value here is that you really are going to have something that matches exactly what you want, the interaction you want. And the interest, since you're going to, in the end, still embed your content to do it through MicroStrategy and not directly on your UI, is because you still get a ton of value from MicroStrategy, from everything happening in the backend, fetching the data, analyzing the data, and then just feeding it to your visualization and having this visualization interacting with all the other visualization that you might be using within your application. So there's a lot of value that it will help you to fast track your project and in the long haul, reduce your maintenance greatly by using MicroStrategy and the Visualization SDK to do so. The third piece will actually be to help your end users to have some addition capabilities. That's one of the feedback we got over the years around library. All the authoring experience today happen in the web framework, and we have customers that actually looked at web because their end user also needed some authoring capabilities. But by looking closely at those use cases, we actually discovered that 95% of the cases, it was not actual authoring. It was more editing. And often those capabilities were already carried into the library framework, which means that they can now be implemented using the embedding SDK. So let's look at what option we can give our users. And right now, I'm going to be pointing the obvious, so don't get mad at me. So what's going to happen right now is that I'm going to use the MicroStrategy capability to use the filtering panel. So what I'm doing is that I'm bringing attributes into the filtering panel to give this filtering capability to end users, but I'm also using visualizations as filter in the filtering panel. We'll see another, using visualization as filter, but this one is happening in the filter panel. So in the user experience in library, which is going to be embedded in the end, I can offer my user, this filtering panel for them to just click and choose what they really want to see on the screen. And this is already at some level, one way to edit and interact with your analytics. And by the way, if for some reason you don't like the UX or the UI of our filtering capability, all of that is open through our REST API. So you have everything to design your own experience and access to the very same, end user behavior. So the next part that I wanted to show you is, back into the authoring mode. You can, of course, again, pointing the obvious, use another visualization within your dossier to filter something else. So here we're going to do some real quick, light design to make it look nice and neat. Still very simple. The idea here is going to be to use this bar chart to filter this grid that is right below. And once you enable that, you, of course, give your end users the capability to have another sense of addition capability, so they can really embrace and feel like they own the analytics. They see something that looks intuitive, they click on it, and it filters something else. Again, not rocket science. I'm sure most of you have already implemented MicroStrategy at such extent. The next part is to go and take a look at something that actually brings a brand new dimension to this addition feeling that your end user are going to have. I'm talking about attribute and metric selectors. We have built in this capability within the dossier experience that allow you to pre-select, dimensions or metrics that you're going to let your end users to customize their own experience. They're going to be able to toggle between what is going to be displayed on my grid, for example. So by doing the pre-selection for my end users, I first ensure that whatever they're going to choose, the result is going to always be there. It's not like starting from a blank screen and potentially run into, I don't know, some bizarre joins that would not work together and that will let the user having like a blank page. This is not what we want. We always want him to have some insights. So by doing that, I'm going to kind of guide his discovery experience, but still give my end users a lot of freedom to customize the visualization to look exactly like what they want and find insights that they want. So we used attributes and metric selector. And now let's take a look at what the end user is going to end up seeing. So it's his visualization, his grid, but he's now empowered to choose what is going to actually be displayed there, what attributes, what metrics. So I now have an end user that had some content that was pre-created for him, but he actually can run this very last mile, the one that really matters, and make it very relevant to his own use cases, to his own needs. Now, of course, this capability, I applied it to a grid just to be, crystal clear and as simple as possible. But this is something that can absolutely be leveraged with any other visualization that you might have. So let's take a look at how it would look on this bar chart, for example. I may want to empower my end users to switch between dimensions. I'm still looking at my revenue, but this time I'm going to be able to toggle, let's say, between, category and subcategory. And so by doing that, once I'm back in the library experience, my end user is going to be able to just choose what he wants to see on the screen. So again, I helped my end users by kind of guiding him through what's possible to customize. But in the end, he's really able to get exactly what he wants on the screen. So this capability is really to be leveraged to empower your users to have this addition feeling. And obviously, as you just saw, it's fully compatible with the previous filtering capability that we saw. So next, what I want to do is actually show you how to loop all of that together. We saw this high-level filtering. We saw how visualizations could filter visualization. We saw how attributes and metrics selectors can let users kind of create their own analytics. And with the bookmark capability, they're really able to save what they have on the screen and basically create their own self-service. They can end up with two versions, let's say, two bookmarks of the same dossier that look nothing like the one before, that provide some insights that are very different from the other version. So by doing so, you really empower your end users to have this addition capability directly in library, which means that it's going to be able directly through the embedding API. Now, let's jump to the embedding API itself. In order to do so, let's take a look at my demo example here that Bob already showed you a couple of screenshots. So here, I'm absolutely not in MicroStrategy. Everything that I have on the screen is, a demo application. It's built in web, in a web framework. It can be HTML, it can be React, it can be Angular, any kind of framework that you may have built your application on. So the idea here is that we are in a transactional system. We're in a system that does not have analytics yet. So I have, a bunch of core capabilities, but I want to extend it. I want to help my end users by infusing some MicroStrategy visualizations in it. So I'm going to do that using the embedding API, and you're going to recognize some of the dossier that we've been working on so far. By using the embedding API, I'm going to actually use div tags that are, a very easy way to interact with web content to get MicroStrategy dossier rendered into my application. And by using div, I actually have a lot of interaction at this level. I can pass a lot of context from my application to the MicroStrategy visualization. Like, for example, on the visualization that I have on the screen right now, you don't see the top bar that I had in my dossier once rendered in library, if you remember. This is because I chose to do so. I passed a parameter that told my visualization not to display it. And the same way I can pass filters, I can pass anything I want from the application to the MicroStrategy visualization. So that really empower you to control what's going to be visualized on the screen based on the context of what your user is in within your application. So just to be clear, I underline here what is now MicroStrategy. You see those two big red box, kind of transparent. So they're here to show what is MicroStrategy. We have two dossiers that we're rendering through two different calls to the embedding API. There's the one with the grid that you see with the attributes and metric selector. We'll go back to it. And the one with the KPI, the bar charts, and a little bit more design. So we have those two different dossiers that are embedded, and they're gonna carry all the different addition capability that I showed you earlier. Like right now, I'm clicking on the bar chart from my revenue category for the kid and family category that seems to be low, or at least I'm not on target, and this is gonna directly filter my grid below to show all the items that are relevant to this particular category. And with this like little red, threshold capability, I can see all the items that I really need to liquidate because I have way too much of those on the shelves and they're not actually revenue producers enough. So I need to do something. Once you have implemented this kind of capability, it's time to take it one step further. What happened right now, and we can go back to it, is that by clicking on this Sesame Street object that was not performing well, I was able to completely complete the loop. And this time I was from MicroStrategy passing context to my application. And you see right here, in the box, I have a box that says Sesame Street. This is because as a user of the embedding API, when my user clicked on Sesame Street, I was able to pass this context through code to my application and completely leave MicroStrategy and go into my business core workflows. And so this is one example, but think about it. Like your app, you could do anything you want. You can generate any kind of code you want now that you have the context. You can do whatever you want with it. You could disconnect the user. You could generate an SAP transaction. You can jump to a specific Salesforce opportunity. There is no limit to what you do after you get this interaction from MicroStrategy, because MicroStrategy lets you know when someone clicks on something through the embedding API, and will let you know all the context behind what the person clicked on. You can create any action that you can think of. And that empowers any workflow that you might want to implement into your application. So the last thing that I wanted to show is, of course, like on this visualization, since it's like my main dashboard right here, I also wanted to leverage those attributes and metric selectors I showed you before to let my users kind of like do this last touch personalization. And so once they leave this screen, I'll go back to it, they'll keep their personalization. So again, you're empowering them to have this addition mindset and to really go across the very last mile of how their analytics should look like. Now, if your framework is also ready for responsiveness, because the MicroStrategy library is already beautifully responsive, if your framework also is you're ready for enabling the mobile experience for your end users. So all the people that are going to be using your application on mobile devices will have the same, beautiful experience. So we talked a lot about embedding when it comes to the UI, but it's actually not the only way that MicroStrategy can be embedded into an application, can actually extend an application. We have a very powerful backend that can be leveraged in so many more ways than the visuals. And in order to empower our end users, we opened everything through REST API. So one of the use cases that Bob talked about earlier is actually one of the classic ones. You ask MicroStrategy for data. MicroStrategy through the REST API is going to give you data back through JSON file format, and then you do whatever you want. We have customers that implemented, voice control assistant. They're asking Alexa, they're asking Google, like for some of their KPIs, and they're getting the information back through voice. And all of the data part is powered by MicroStrategy, fed by the JSON file format through the REST APIs, and then the retrieval part, the putting into language, is then whatever custom development you want to put on top of it. So again, the sky is the limit. Now there's another area of this REST API that I would say, to some extent, is even more powerful. So this is MicroStrategy Workstation, and now you're gonna ask yourself, like, why is Antoine showing me MicroStrategy Workstation? We were talking about embedding a second ago. So the reason is that if you really wanted to, you could completely build your own MicroStrategy Workstation, because everything you're seeing within the MicroStrategy Workstation is built on REST APIs. And this is really what should be always on your mind when you think about extending your application, extending administrative capabilities, extending automation capabilities. Like, for example, if you like at Workstation, sorry, it's gonna let you control, let's say, your subscriptions, for example. And if for some reason you have a specific idea about how subscription should be offered to your end users, you can build it. Everything is available through REST APIs, meaning that you have everything to create your own UI and give your end users the exact experience you want to share with them. Same goes for user management, for example. Those are some great use cases we've seen with some of our customers. We have customers that have complex processes, that have third party that are managing their own users at different levels. So what they ended up doing is simplifying the workflow and just creating beautiful UIs built on top of our user management REST APIs, and just told their user, you know what, manage your own user community. And that worked seamlessly. And this was enabled because we took care of making sure that all our capabilities are covered through REST APIs. So here I named a few, but really the big value that we are seeing these days is how those REST APIs can be leveraged within every company's CI/CD workflow. When it comes to automation, you can have third-party tools that are completely provisioning environments by calling REST APIs. And this is really where you're gonna get a lot of value, especially when you look at total cost of ownership, because by taking this approach, MicroStrategy really made sure that we're going to be fully compatible with any third-party application that you might be using for your provisioning, for your monitoring, and you can use any capabilities that you see within MicroStrategy through our REST APIs. So what we saw during this presentation was embedding the visual part through the embedding API, and you see that the opportunities are endless and the workflows that you can implement are unlimited. And there also this part where all the administrative part, all the data retrieval capability can be leveraged through REST APIs, and again, lets you enable any kind of user experience or application that you might want to offer to your end users. So I hope you enjoyed this content, and we'll be happy to take questions and clarify maybe some areas that you want to go back to.